Every empire believes its money is different. Rome believed that too. For centuries, Roman power rested on something deceptively simple: trust. Trust that its coins held value. Trust that labor would be paid fairly. Trust that trade would continue tomorrow the way it worked today. As long as that trust existed, Rome expanded, stabilized, and dominated the ancient world. The Roman denarius was once solid silver, not symbolic silver, not theoretical value. Real metal, with real weight. Merchants accepted it across continents. Soldiers fought for it. Taxes were paid with it. Money worked, and because money worked, the system worked. But empires don't collapse when they are strong. They collapse when they try to stay strong after the math stops working. Rome's costs grew faster than its ability to pay for them. Standing armies became permanent. Borders stretched farther. Wars multiplied. Bureaucracy expanded. Public welfare programs grew. Conquest slowed, but spending didn't. Rome faced the problem every empire eventually faces: revenue plateaus while obligations explode. At that moment, there are only three options: cut spending, raise taxes, or manipulate the money. Rome chose the third. It didn't announce inflation, it disguised it. The coins looked the same size, same imperial authority, but inside, the silver content was reduced. At first, the change was small enough to ignore, then small enough to deny, then too large to hide. More coins were minted from the same amount of silver. More money entered the economy without an increase in real value. This is inflation, long before printing presses existed. As more debased coins circulated, prices began to rise. Merchants demanded more coins for the same goods. Soldiers demanded higher wages to maintain their standard of living. The state responded the only way it could, by minting even more money. Each new round of debasement solved a short-term problem and created a larger long-term one. The currency weakened. Trust eroded. By the 3rd century, the denarius had lost more than 90% of its silver content. At that point, Roman money no longer represented stored value. It represented political authority demanding belief. People noticed. Older coins disappeared from circulation. They were hoarded, hidden, or melted down. New coins were rejected or discounted. Barter returned. Payments shifted to goods instead of currency. Trade slowed. Money, the lubricant of complex civilization, stopped functioning. The government panicked. Emperor Diocletian attempted to freeze prices by law. He declared maximum prices for goods and services. Raising prices became a crime. The result was immediate failure. Goods vanished from legal markets. Black markets exploded. Producers stopped selling rather than sell at a loss. You cannot legislate trust. You cannot threaten an economy into working. As the currency collapsed, society fractured. The middle class was squeezed out of existence. Small landowners lost their property. Wealth concentrated in elites with access to hard assets. Tax burdens crushed ordinary citizens. People stopped believing Rome represented fairness or stability. And when belief dies, loyalty follows. Rome still had walls. Rome still had soldiers. Rome still had laws. But it no longer had economic legitimacy. By the time invasions intensified, the empire was already hollow. Trade networks were fragile. Local economies were rigid and isolated. Money was distrusted. The popular story blames barbarian invasions for Rome's fall. But invasions don't destroy healthy systems. They exploit weakened ones. Inflation didn't destroy Rome overnight. It made Rome brittle. It removed flexibility. It destroyed incentives. It replaced trust with force. Rome did not collapse suddenly. It decayed slowly from the inside out. And Rome is not unique. This pattern has repeated across centuries and civilizations. Expansion creates costs. Costs exceed revenue. Money is manipulated. Trust erodes. Society fractures. Collapse accelerates. Every empire believes it can control inflation. Every empire believes its situation is special. Every empire believes it will stop before it's too late. None do. Rome's story is not ancient trivia. It is a warning encoded in history. If you want to understand where economies are heading, you don't start with predictions. You start with patterns. History doesn't repeat itself. It exposes what happens when humans make the same choices again. And Rome showed the world exactly how it ends. The grandeur of Rome wasn't just built on legions and marble. It was built on a silver coin, the denarius. For centuries, this small piece of metal was the lifeblood of an empire, a symbol of its power and stability. But what happens when that symbol becomes worthless? This is the story of how Rome's economy crumbled, not from invading armies, but from within. A cautionary tale of inflation, debasement, and the slow death of a superpower. It all started subtly, almost invisibly. In the age of Augustus, the denarius was nearly pure silver, a coin you could trust, but the empire's ambitions outstripped its income. Endless wars, lavish constructions, and a sprawling bureaucracy cost a fortune. The mines in Spain and Britain couldn't keep up. The first domino fell under Emperor Nero. Facing a financial crunch, he made a fateful decision. He reduced the silver content of the denarius by about 10%, mixing in cheaper metals like copper. To the naked eye, the coin looked the same, but it was a lie, a secret held by the state. This was the birth of debasement. Nero could mint more coins from the same amount of silver, funding his extravagant projects and paying his soldiers. It seemed like a clever fix, a magic trick to create wealth from nothing. For a while, the trick worked. But subsequent emperors, facing their own crises, repeated and amplified Nero's deception. Trajan, despite his conquests in Dacia bringing a windfall of gold, still slightly reduced the silver purity to fund his massive public works. Under Marcus Aurelius, the pressure of constant warfare on the frontiers led to a more significant drop, down to about 75% silver. People began to notice a savvy merchant might weigh the coins or test their purity. Older, purer coins started disappearing from circulation, hoarded as a safer store of value. This is a classic economic principle known as Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. Why spend a high-purity coin when a debased one has the same official value? The Severan dynasty, founded by Septimius Severus, turned debasement into official policy. He raised army pay dramatically, a necessity to maintain loyalty, and funded it by slashing the silver content to around 50%. The denarius was now half base metal. His son Caracalla introduced a new coin, the Antoninianus, officially valued at 2 dinar, but weighing only 1.5 times as much. It was another short-term fix, a blatant deception that flooded the economy with even more debased currency. The state was now openly cheating its people. The real spiral began during the crisis of the 3rd century. A 50-year period of civil war, plague, and invasions saw emperors rise and fall with terrifying speed. Each barracks emperor, often a general proclaimed by his troops, needed to pay his army to secure power. With no time for long-term economic planning, they turned to the only tool they had, the mint. They debased the currency with reckless abandon. By the reign of Gallienus, the Antoninianus, once a silver coin, contained less than 5% silver. It was little more than a bronze coin with a thin silver wash that would rub off in a matter of weeks. It was, for all intents and purposes, a fraud. The consequences of this rampant inflation were catastrophic, tearing at the very fabric of Roman society. Let's look at the urban plebeians in Rome. For generations they had relied on the unknown. The state subsidized grain dole, but as the state's silver ran out, its ability to purchase grain from provinces like Egypt and North Africa dwindled. Shipments became unreliable. The price of bread in the open market skyrocketed, far beyond the reach of the average worker. Imagine the fear of a baker whose life savings, held in denarii, could barely buy a few sacks of flour, when just a generation before it could have bought a whole cartload. Riots over food were common. Public works, the aqueducts, roads, and bathhouses that were the hallmark of Roman civilization, ground to a halt. The state was too broke to maintain them. The magnificent structures that symbolized Roman power began to crumble from neglect. Out in the countryside, the impact was just as devastating. Small-scale farmers, the backbone of the early republic, were hit from all sides. They sold their produce for coins that were losing value by the day. Meanwhile, the tax collectors still demanded payment, but taxes were increasingly demanded not in worthless coins, but in kind, a portion of their actual harvest, grain, oil, or wine. This was a desperate move by the state to bypass its own broken currency. Many farmers, unable to meet these demands and crushed by debt, were forced to abandon their land. They fled to the protection of wealthy landowners, becoming coloni, tenant farmers tied to the land in a state of near serfdom. This was the seed of medieval feudalism, planted in the soil of Roman economic collapse. The independent farmer, a Roman ideal, was vanishing. And what of the legions, the very force the debasement was meant to appease? A soldier's pay, once a source of pride and security, became a joke. Emperors could promise them huge sums, but the coins they received were worthless. A soldier in 270 AD might be paid with a bag of bronze coins that had the same face value as his grandfather as solid silver pay, but the purchasing power was gone. This led to a breakdown in discipline and loyalty. Why fight for an emperor who paid you in fake money? Legions began to mutiny, not for political reasons, but simply because they were starving. They would plunder their own provinces to survive, becoming a force of destruction rather than protection. The state, in trying to afford its army, had ultimately destroyed its reliability. The psychological toll was immense. Imagine living in a world where everything you thought was stable was dissolving. The coins in your hand, the grain in the market, the authority of the state, all of it was built on lies. Trust, the invisible glue holding the empire together, evaporated. A deep cynicism set in. People retreated from public life, focusing only on their own survival. They hoarded whatever they could, whether it was old, pure coins or bartered goods. The vibrant, interconnected market economy of the early empire shattered, replaced by localized barter systems. A farmer would trade his wheat directly for a blacksmith's tools because a coin was just a useless piece of metal. This wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. Into this chaos stepped the Emperor Diocletian, a stern and brilliant military commander. He saw the empire was on the verge of total disintegration and was determined to save it. He recognized that the monetary system was beyond repair. In 301 AD he issued the Edict on Maximum Prices. This was one of the most ambitious and authoritarian economic experiments in history. The edict set a fixed price for everything over 1,000 goods and services, from wheat and beef to haircuts and legal fees. It also fixed wages for all professions. The penalty for violating the edict was death. On the surface, it seemed like a logical solution to stop inflation, but it was a spectacular failure. The edict didn't address the root cause of the problem, which was the worthless currency. The prices Diocletian set were often below the actual cost of production and transport. So, what happened? Merchants simply refused to sell their goods at the artificially low prices. They took them off the market, leading to massive shortages. A vibrant black market emerged, where goods were sold illegally at prices that reflected their real value. The edict, meant to make goods affordable, made them disappear entirely. It created famine in places that had plenty of food, simply because no one would transport or sell it. After widespread riots and economic paralysis, the edict was quietly abandoned. It was a powerful lesson. You cannot simply command an economy to bend to your will. Diocletian's reforms had a more lasting and profound impact. He essentially formalized the shift away from a money economy. He massively expanded the bureaucracy and the system of collecting taxes in kind. The state now directly requisitioned goods and labor. A soldier was no longer paid in coins but was given food, equipment, and land directly from the state. A bureaucrat received his salary in the form of rations and supplies. This was the birth of a command economy. People were locked into their professions by law. A baker's son had to become a baker. A soldier's son had to become a soldier. This was done to ensure the state had the goods and services it needed, but it crushed individual freedom and social mobility. The empire was becoming a rigid, caste-like society, a far cry from the dynamic world of the Pax Romana. When we look at Rome's hyperinflation, we see chilling parallels to modern times. The debasement of the denarius by mixing in base metals is not so different from modern governments printing money to cover their deficits, a process known as quantitative easing. In both cases, the money supply is increased, not because of economic growth, but to meet state obligations. This devalues the currency held by ordinary citizens. The flight to hard assets, like Romans hoarding pure silver coins or land, is mirrored today when people rush to buy gold, real estate, or cryptocurrencies during times of high inflation, seeking a safe haven from their devaluing currency. Rome's story is a stark reminder that economic stability is not a given. It is a fragile contract based on trust, and when that trust is broken by the state itself, the consequences can be apocalyptic. The fall of Rome was not a single event. It was a long, grinding process of decay, and the debasement of its currency was the cancer that ate away at its foundations, leaving a hollow shell for the barbarian migrations to finally push over. It's a story etched not just in the ruins of the Forum, but in every debased coin that has survived, a tiny metal testament to how a mighty empire dissolved into dust. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into Roman history insightful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories from the ancient world. Your support helps us continue to bring the past to life.